Good morning and welcome to this special edition of Pirate News Desk. I'm Ryan Henry, joined alongside two members of Seton Hall's mock trial team, Nick Webb and Dom Pope. Before we get into everything, how are you guys doing today?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing really well as well. Thank you. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So, for the people who are listening who aren't familiar with what mock trial is, give me a bit of a simplified version or rundown version of what actually is entailed.
So basically, it's a simulated legal trial that is done against other schools at different competitions across the country. There's a regular season, there's a competitive season, but basically at Seton Hall we have three teams that we're sending to different tournaments all over the place. Me and Dom are very heavily involved in Seton Hall mock trial. I've been a captain the past 3 semesters. We're both on the executive board. Dom's the vice president. But mock trial is sort of a fun extracurricular that we all spend a lot of time doing and competing against other schools. Tom, you want to say anything?
Yeah, I mean, overall, you pretty much covered most of it. But yeah, you're just kind of boiling down a trial to the span of like 3 hours and just going through all the big parts, direct examination, cross examination, opening statements, closing statements, objections, that sort of thing. But I mean, it really has been probably like the best and like most like fundamental thing I've been involved in at my time with like Seton Hall and everything.
So, preparing for these cases, what is the preparation like going into a competition?
So basically, there's one case that everyone's going to be competing with, and there's an array of witnesses. You have people playing both attorneys and witnesses. So a lot of the time spent on mock trial is preparing material, and what that usually consists of is attorneys working with witnesses, writing direct examinations, practicing them until they're memorized, getting used to getting objections and running them, preparing cross examinations for when you're going to cross the other side's witnesses, and for some attorneys on both sides, preparing statements, opening statement, closing statement. Everything's timed. Basically, the way it works is each team has 25 minutes in total for their direct examinations, 25 minutes in total for their cross examinations, time stopping for objections, and then there's time for statements as well. Dom, do you want to talk a little bit about how you prepare, as a witness, what goes on to it there, or maybe the executive board side of it?
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely get into like witnessing since that's pretty much all I do. It's a little bit different for attorneys, like when you're looking at a trial for attorneys, it's more of a marathon, whereas with witnesses, it's a sprint because you're up there for like 20, maybe like, yeah, probably around about like 20 minutes. And, you're just being asked question after question, you're rattling off all this information. So it's definitely like a big undertaking, especially if you're playing like multiple witnesses, you're focusing on like getting memorized, which is a struggle. But yeah, it's definitely something that's really fun, the competitive side. And I've also gotten a lot of the club, like organizational side of things, being vice president, making sure, like we're making it to tournaments, we have the funding we need, that sort of thing.
So, how do you come about deciding what you're going to do? Because Nick, you're an attorney, Dom, you're a witness. How is that whole process determined? Does it change from, case to case, or how is it determined?
Absolutely. So, basically, that sort of thing is mostly run by the captains in conjunction with the coaches. So, in the fall, when you're a new member and you come in, there's a couple practices where the team kind of gets to know each other and gets to know the case before the captains figure and the coaches figure out what roles fit best for everybody. Funny enough, I actually last year was my first year. I thought I was going to be a witness, but my captain at the time, Miles, ended up talking to me, and I decided to be an attorney. And then, from then it really depends on strengths. Some people are just attorneys, some people are just witnesses, some people do both. But the better you get to know people on your team, the more you kind of see like, okay, that person would probably be good at this kind of witness. This person is really good at opening statements. This person's, really good at closing statements. And you really you try to maximize the most amount of points you can get on the team in total. Because the way scoring works is there's usually two judges, and they score every single thing someone does. So attorney during direct examination, they get a score. Witness during cross examination, they get a score. Closing statement, that attorney gets a score. And the total number of points added up at the end of trial, that's who wins that judge's ballot. And so really you're trying to put everyone in the best position to succeed and get the team together as a whole.
So you mentioned judging ballots. Who are the ones judging these ballots?
So that's actually a funny question. I ran the judging for our tournament that we hosted on campus. So I was bringing in those volunteers. A lot of them are like real attorneys. You can have people who've done mock trial before, maybe law students, professors, just people with general legal experience. And depending on like what tournament you're at, you could have some judges who are like more qualified, like at nationals, like there was all people there who was like very serious about mock trial, like top of their game professionals judging around. So I think it really comes down to, like what tournament you're at. But if you're at like a tournament just being run by like a school like ours, generally it's going to be a lot of like local lawyers as well as like people who've done mock trial before.
I wanted to circle back something you mentioned a bit earlier. So Dom, you mentioned being multiple witnesses. What is it like juggling, the knowledge and responsibilities of not only just one witness, but multiple within the same case?
I mean, it's definitely really tough. Last year was probably the year that I was playing the most witnesses, with just like the way our team was comprised when we were trying to make it to nationals. So I ended up playing like 3 different expert witnesses at a tournament. So like these were all like 3 different like doctors, like like these like professional characters, and like you're trying to remember like numbers and like terms. And it definitely is a lot playing multiple witnesses. It's something I can do. Do I prefer to do it? No. Like at nationals this year, I was only on one witness, which I think is like the optimal setup, just so that you're not drawn in multiple directions and getting things mixed up or confused.
Yeah, I've never really played any witnesses, but I know the preparation that goes into it is pretty extensive. For me at nationals, I was double siding, so I was on the plaintiff and the defense. So, I had witnesses that I was directing on both sides. I had a statement for one side. I had to know a lot of witnesses that I was cross-examining. But how well you need to know a witness is a completely different level from an attorney to a witness, because, if I don't know something about a witness, that can look bad for me, but I'm an attorney who doesn't know something about someone who's called in the trial. But, if Dom doesn't know something about his witness, well,
It's catastrophic.
then he's a person who doesn't know like where he was at a certain
Yeah.
time. He loses a lot of credibility. So it's very impressive to me how witnesses really it's acting. A lot of these witnesses, like one of our best witnesses, heavily involved in the theater program. There's a lot of overlap. Dom is really playing somebody.
You mentioned playing a character, and you're saying it's like an actor. You're getting to this character. Dom, how do you prepare getting into that character, getting into that role to be the best or most convincing witness? Because I know you've had multiple awards doing that.
I think it really just comes down to like what witness am I playing, right? So if I'm playing an expert witness, like maybe it's like a fire investigator, I start watching like YouTube videos on like what fire investigators do. Like I try and figure out like how are these people in the real life, and then I try and kind of go after that. Maybe I throw out like some terminology and stuff, so where I feel comfortable, where I'm like, yo, I'm like this role, And then also, this is across the board for all witnesses I play. I never try and like play up a character that's like too far distant from myself. I always like to play things where it's like, if I ended up being a fire investigator, this is how I would be, and this is how I would explain. This would be my personality on the stand. So you very much want to take your own personality and then apply it to whatever witness you're playing.
Nick, you mentioned you have double side before, meaning you've been both working for the plaintiff and defense team. What is it like? Was it like doing both for the same case, and what are the differences in approaching a case as a plaintiff and a defendant?
So for me, I really like double siding because I feel like I get a little more perspective. I can kind of see where the other side's coming from because I'm trying to do the same thing. Um, in terms of preparation and getting your mind right, for me, what works best is I really have to compartmentalize and say, okay, right now I'm thinking about the plaintiff side. That's where my perspective is. I'm working with this witness. I'm working on this cross. Okay, mindset shift. I'm working on the defense. And so for me, it really just I try to change the whole way I think about the case. So At nationals, it was a legal malpractice case. Dom actually played the defendant. He was on trial for legal malpractice. Someone was wrongly convicted of a murder. And so when I was on the defense, I was at the counsel table. I was sitting next to Dom. I'm thinking to myself, this attorney did a good job, right? He didn't commit legal malpractice. This claim is nonsense, and I'm going to defend, and I'm going to show that in this trial. And then when I'm on the plaintiff, I'm thinking like, this is ridiculous. This person got sent to jail unfairly. We got to get this, scumbag attorney who messed up. So I try to change my complete mentality with it.
So another thing you mentioned that you done, excuse me, you are a captain. You mentioned you decide what role people are in for cases. What else does being a captain entail?
So the role of a captain, I think, really changes based on the type of team you have. So, this past fall, I was on. In the fall, we have unstacked teams, so a lot mix of freshmen, new people, people of various skill levels and experience. And in that situation, you kind of have two roles. You're kind of the leader of the competitive team, and you're the teacher. So you're bringing people who have no experience with mock trial, never done it before, or have in high school, but only not to the same extent. And you're teaching them how to do a direct examination. You're teaching them how to play a witness. And I kind of had a similar role last spring when I was captain of our third team. We have of the three stacked teams, I was the captain of the third. That's very different than the role of a captain this spring semester, where it's a team and everybody knows all their stuff. Everybody knows how to do their role. And there it's more, guidance, strategy, making sure everybody's on the same page. And it's kind of being that bridge between the different groups that are, that are working together. This attorney witness pair, making sure they're on the same page as this attorney witness pair. And, my co-captain, Lillian Viets, she was extremely helpful, awesome. Nobody I'd rather be a co-captain with. I actually co-captained with her last spring too. But there's just any logistical things on the small level of the team, the captains are thinking about them.
So another thing I wanted to touch base on, you mentioned both of you are on the executive board for mock trial. What is entailed in setting up the behind the scenes of that, and what is being on the executive board like?
So the key to mock trial is you can have the best mock trial team in the world, right? But what you really need to be successful is money. And that's what it comes down to. It's entirely a game of how much money can you get so you can go to as many tournaments as possible to prepare for the competitive season. So like for me this year, it was a lot of like tracking down money. We were having money issues trying to bring it in. So for me, it was very much like, all right, how can we make it to this tournament that's happening this weekend and it's the week of and I still don't have hotels booked, so it's very much something, you're working a lot with the administration, and they've always been very flexible with us, very grateful to them, but it's definitely something, it's a lot like work on the organizational side of things, which I really enjoy, just kind of like being able to like get in there and making sure that our club is set up for future success.
I mean, it seems like you're kind of you have another responsibility, another just challenge of not only competing for a tournament, but you also have to be the ones deciding who goes to what tournament, and it seems like another job added on top of it. So I want to backtrack a bit to when both of you first joined mock trial. Just give me a bit of the rundown of what led you to joining mock trial, who was influential, or what was the initial reasoning for joining mock trial?
So I originally joined my freshman year, so that was 2 years back. And for me, I just heard like, oh, if you want to be a lawyer, do mock trial. And I was looking out for ways to get involved because I was fully remote like my freshman year. So I was like, all right, I gotta try and get, like something going here. So I joined the club, and it was really something. I was like kind of trying to like figure it out. Especially like not being there with everybody. But it was something that kind of was drew me in. I was weirdly good at playing witnesses my first year. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was that like trials were on Zoom, but it was something I was like the only way I could like get close to people since I was remote, and that's kind of what drew me in.
For me, I was interested my freshman year, but I missed the auditions. They're in the first couple weeks of school. So if you're listening to this and you want to get involved, make sure you follow the Instagram and keep an eye out for that next fall. So I ended up missing freshman year, COVID year, totally missed it. And then I made sure my sophomore year, I found the tent, showed up for the interest meeting, and to be honest with you, as soon as I got in the room, I knew that this was something I wanted to do. For me, I'm very interested in the law. I still want to be a lawyer. I'm heading to Seton Hall Law next year, and everything about it, the competitive aspects of it, the social aspects. I remember in my first couple weeks, there was like a fun like meet the team thing in the Fahey basement with like pizza. Uh, and I fell right in love with the club. And I mean, I started that fall. This past summer, me and Dom were working in California at like a mock trial camp. Mock trial has completely taken over my life.
Yeah, it's taken over my life, as painful as it is to admit that.
Did working in that camp over the summer help you guys? Did it help with you guys like your rapport, your kind of team chemistry going into this season? Do you think that helped in that aspect?
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, not only was it like a great opportunity for like Nick and I to really get closer, but like we also developed a lot on the mock trial side of things because you're working with people from all over the country, like when you go like nationals, you get to see teams from all over the country. This is a good way to kind of get that same experience because you're working with them, you're bouncing ideas off each other, you're seeing how people from Northwestern do mock trial. And it's something that, you can then take that and allow those influences to better your own performance.
Yeah, I mean, working this summer with great people from different mock trial programs all over the country, I think it made me a lot more comfortable at nationals this year, just because, there was, 6 degrees of separation from like, any team that we meet. You're like, oh, you go to, University of Florida, and someone who we worked with also went there, so we know people, and just it kind of brought us into the community a little bit. For me, the camp was 4 sessions, and so that was 4 times I was teaching a group of high schoolers a hearsay and all these different objections. And for me, teaching is sort of like the best way that I learn. So after a whole summer of teaching kind of like the basics of mock trial, I felt like I was really prepared going into the fall to teach freshmen, like some of whom were the same age as kids I had over the summer, those same building blocks, right fresh.
So you come into this season and you have a historic season for Seton Hall standards. You make it to nationals for the first time in over a decade. What was it like for you, both on an individual and a team level, for you to break through and compete in mock trial at the highest level in terms of collegiates?
I mean, I know for me, like this was like my third year doing mock trial, and like the past 2 years, we've always been really close to making it to nationals. Like especially like my freshman year, like we were like one ballot off from making it, which is always like really heartbreaking to miss out on. It was something where it just like seems like this kind of like vague thing where it was like, oh yeah, there's nationals going on, but I don't have to worry about that. And then we made it this year, and I like it really, kind of opened up the door. And I was like, man, like Seton Hall mock trial, like we really could be like that team, like that team who's there, getting it done, going nationals, and it's like building up this great program. So it was definitely something I was excited for, also nervous for, because I was like, man, I don't know how we're going to pay for this. So it was something that, I would like driving back. We were in DC when we found out. So we were driving back to New Jersey. And the entire time I'm like, where am I going to get money to get us to Memphis for like 5 days? Like, there's no way,
Yeah. Shout out to the provost office
Yeah.
and shout out to John Radwin for working with us throughout the competitive season. You kind of have a schedule of tournaments that you want to attend during the regular season, and the regionals tournament, which is like kind of the first of 3 rounds of the competitive season, but you don't know how many tournaments you have after that. So we did really well at regionals, so then we were going to orcs, which is the second level, and then we do really well at orcs and we're going to nationals, and you don't necessarily anticipate that. So huge shout out to the provost office for working with us throughout this entire season.
Yeah, they were definitely somebody, like without them, like there would have been no way we would have made it to nationals. So definitely like they were there when we really needed it with the funding.
So what was it actually like competing at nationals? Was it different than orcs and regionals, or was it just you approached it like another tournament?
So, you try to approach it like another tournament, but there's some things that are kind of unusual. For one, you're working on the same case the entire season, and usually, at the beginning of the season, you have like a couple months from when the case drops before you compete, so you have some time to kind of get used to it. The Nationals case is a little shorter, but it drops right after orcs are done, and it's a brand new case. You have a month basically
Yeah.
to prep it, and you're figuring out how you're getting there, and you weren't expecting to do this. So, a lot of people, they had like obligations and plans that they had pushed off till after orcs, that all of a sudden, like, oh wait, no, I'm still doing mock trial. So, you know, the actual competing was awesome, right? Mock trial is mock trial. The rules are the same. The direct examination time's the same. But usually we're in kind of classrooms at some university. That's what we do at our tournament. That's kind of the standard. In Memphis, we had the federal criminal and civil courthouse in downtown Memphis for the weekend, and we were in these real courtrooms that are regularly being used for real federal trials. We had awesome judging. Lots of judges who were like actual judges, and actual someone worked at the U.S. Attorney's office.
Yeah.
A lot of really prominent local Memphis lawyers who were volunteering their time, and just the competition level really stepped up. And I think in a lot of ways that let us and kind of helped us step up our game. I know we competed against Northwestern, who is a top 10 ranked team in the country. They were super nice, but we'd never hit a top 10 team in the country all season. So it was sort of like, we're kind of measuring ourselves like, okay, how can we compete against the top schools? How far are we from being one of those top schools? And also we got to kind of see how they do it and be like, whoa, like I liked that. Like maybe we work that in somewhere next year, like that, how they're doing it, we can kind of emulate. And we have, recordings of those rounds too, which is great.
So one last question before we wrap it up. You mentioned being one of the top schools. Seton Hall this year, mock trial team was the best school in New Jersey for mock trial, or they were the highest ranking team. What was it like getting that accomplishment, and then how do you use that experience from nationals to maintain form and even get better next year?
So, there are a lot of great teams in New Jersey, and we compete against them all the time. We compete against Rutgers. We compete against NJCU. Princeton. We see a good amount. Rider University just started up. It's a great school, but we take a lot of pride in being the team from New Jersey that went to nationals this year. Was kind of setting the pace, and we hope to be one of if not the most prominent team in New Jersey going forward. We have the Pirate Invitational, which is our tournament where we're inviting a lot of local New Jersey teams. We're inviting teams from the surrounding area, and we just want to kind of ingratiate ourselves a little more with the mock trial community in the Northeast, because it's a great one.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, East Coast mock trial is like some of the hardest you can do in the nation. So, to be out here competing on this level, I mean, especially since there's so many teams that are so close together geographically to us, it definitely, it is something like, bring the New Jersey teams closer together, build that community, and, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for coming on. That'll do for this weekend's edition of the Pirate News Desk. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. The views expressed on this show are solely those of the hosts and do not reflect the opinions of WSOU, Seton Hall University, or their affiliates. For Ryan Henry, joined alongside Nick Webb and Dom Pope. We'll be back with the news next Sunday.